I just want to, Sam is here with the audit. Tonight is not a question and answer night. He's just going to cover some stuff, and he will be back at the next meeting, Sam, is that correct?
If you like, yes.
Okay, if there's questions and stuff. Turn it over to you, sir.
But if you do have questions, kind of write them down so that way he knows what to expect and where we're going, so that way he has the answers. So.
Very good. All right, sir.
Yeah, that's about okay. Good. And Donnie too.
Just walk.
Okay, well with that introduction and preface, let me just say a couple things about this. In the time frame that we have here, we can't really go through, roughly a 40-page document with lots of detail. And so that's the reason to give you this draft tonight, so you can take some time, read it, peruse it. Any questions that either Jim or Yvonne can't answer, they'll try to help get them answered for you. And we have some time. You'll note it here, if you looked at the, like Harry here, you cheated and you went to the, you're not just teasing, you went to the opinion letter, you'll notice it's dated September 10th. The reason for that is I believe that's your next scheduled meeting, and so between now and then, we hope to address any questions or concerns that you have, so that it could be finalized that date. And that would be the actual release date of the report. Until then, it's just available to, of course, our board here and management. So with that, let me just go through a few things I think are of some importance. Things that maybe changed a little bit between last year and this. But I'll start on pages 1 and 2. It's the auditor's report or opinion letter. You can see now that it keeps getting longer every year. But I'll just tell you without taking the time to read that it's essentially what we consider unqualified, or the term nowadays is unmodified, meaning that the financial statements as they're presented to you, we can fairly present financial position and results of operations. So that's a good thing. You'll notice that that's followed by several pages, about pages, I think there are 3 through about 10 or so, excuse me, it's entitled Management's Discussion and Analysis. And if you thumb through there, you'll notice there's some financial statement type tables. That information is extracted from the body of the financial statements and then presented in kind of a condensed form. It's designed to address the statement reader that either doesn't have the time or the interest in studying the whole 30, 40 pages that follow it, but enough to give them an idea of what the district does, where you get your funding from, what we spend it on, and maybe over time some general idea of whether our financial position is improving or deteriorating. So that's a required element, has been for several years now. And technically it's a management document. We update the dates and the table amounts for you. We asked Jim and Yvonne to review some of the other verbiage and updated it for some things that they suggested as well. So we think we incorporated all of that. The government-wide financial statements are on 2 pages, pages 11 and 12. Page 11 is a statement of net position, we call it, and page 12 is a statement of activities. So I didn't intend to spend lots of time on this, but here's something I want you to try to recall. you guys from prior discussions, these two statements are kind of a combination of all of our activities. You'll notice there's two columns, governmental activities and business type activities. So business type activities to us here is our water and sewer funds and some of the property management funds. The rest of our activities are in the governmental column. So that's how it's fragmented. And realize that this financial statement includes all long-term assets and long-term liabilities. So we put fixed assets, land, buildings, property, and equipment, minus an allowance for depreciation on the asset side of that financial statement. And on the liability side, it includes any long-term obligations. In our case, the water and sewer funds as business type activities use full accrual accounting. And so those assets and liabilities are reflected in your normal accounting in those funds. But in the general fund and other governmental funds, long-term assets and liabilities are not presented. We'll see that in a moment when we look at the general fund numbers. But they are in this statement. So it's a little different than what you see in your internal financial statements. And it's designed for statement readers such as, say, bond underwriters and folks of that nature to understand what the financial statements of the district would look like if we sort of consolidate all of its activities. So it includes long-term assets, liabilities, an allowance for depreciation, and full accrual accounting concepts. Page 12, the statement of activities, is close as we come to calling something an income statement, but essentially that's what it is. We present that in some broad functional categories by the expenses associated with them, reduce that by program revenues, and then that sort of results in a residual, which is always a negative, to demonstrate how much of those program costs have to be covered by general revenues. So general revenues in our case, most importantly, would be property tax revenue, SO tax revenue, interest, and so on.
So the stuff showed as negative is covered by that, is what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly the concept. It's a little different than you see in other settings, as we start with the expense side and reduce it by operating revenues that are associated with those specific programs to get to a residual. That residual is essentially always negative because we're coming up with an amount that has to be funded by other general revenues of the district. So that's the concept. Page 13 is the first of the governmental fund statements, and you can see that it's the general fund only in our case. And there's a couple things here that are of some importance. Most of these things will be very familiar to you because your internal financial statements are done on exactly the same basis of accounting as they're presented here. But in the audit report, we updated for a couple of things. You'll notice, first of all, this includes only current assets, so no long-term assets like buildings, land, property, equipment, for example, nor any long-term liabilities. We do have payables and accruals, which are, pretty similar from year to year. And fund balances is where it gets interesting. It used to be, years ago, that was just a single residual number. Now you can see it's fragmented into several categories. So just a brief statement about those. Prepaid items is essentially prepaid expense. So for example, we pay insurance premiums in advance. And it covers a period that extends beyond the end of our year. So that extended period is considered prepaid. And in the fund balance section, you'll see prepaid items 35,132. It's just stated as a separate element in a non-spendable category, meaning it doesn't give us a financial resource that we can appropriate again. It's already spent, it's just the timing issue. Inventories, similarly, are, and assets, of course, not appropriable, again, for future spending unless we turn it to cash, for example, sell something. And we have two restricted categories. Tabor is what we might sometimes internally refer to as a Tabor reserve or as a 3% reserve requirement. roughly equates to 3% of your non-exempt spending. So if we look at it in just a moment here, our spending in our general fund, for example, is a little over $1 million. So 3% of that's 30,000. But not all of that spending is subject to the reserve requirement. Things that are common exclusions would be insurance proceeds, sale of property, so asset sales, federal funds, donations, foundation grants. In our case, we get some lottery funding too, some directly, some passes through to us, also are exclusions from that basis. So that's the reason the Tabor reserve, as you see it there, is $26,100, a little less than that, roughly 3% figure would turn out to be. And Conservation Trust Fund, or CTF, is essentially lottery monies passing through from the state to us, and those are restricted by statute to certain types of expenditures. We don't have to spend it all in the year that we receive it, so you can see we have some residual carrying forward from the end of 18 to future years in the amount of $30,860. And unassigned is also unrestricted. That's $196,746, and essentially represents the residual fund equity that is not spoken for by some contractual obligation or statutory requirement, and is essentially appropriable by our governing board. Page 14 is a reconciliation of the government-wide statements to the general fund. And page 15 is a summary of revenues and expenditures in the general fund. And just a few comments here quickly. Total revenues for this last year, 18, were $1,004,108. If you're interested, you don't have a 2017 report handy, but I looked up the number. Our total revenues in 2017 were very similar. It was $1,004,129. Now the mix of the sources changed a bit from 17 to 18, but the total was very comparable. Total expenditures, you can see, is $1,054,146 this year. Last year it was $1,107,213. So a little reduction there on the order of about 53,000 or so. But this year we had expenditures greater than revenues, so net loss, if you want to think of it that way, of $50,038. Last year it was $103,084. So roughly half in terms of its magnitude compared to 2017. Page 16 is a reconciliation of the changes in fund balance to the government-wide. And then we get on page 17 the beginning of the proprietary fund financial statements. You can see the water, sewer, and property management funds each have their own column. And a couple things here of note. The fund balance here isn't called fund balance in a proprietary fund setting. It's called net position. So if you scan down to the bottom, you'll see net investment in capital assets, $4 million. Let's just, as an example, look at the water fund, $4,067,907. That's the carrying value of our capital assets minus the balance of the outstanding debt that is associated with those capital assets. So it's a net of the two. Restricted, you see in that column, is $241,951. In the sewer fund, it's $42,702. So you see a restricted total there, $284,653. Roughly equates to 1 year of debt service requirement on our outstanding bonds. So we're required to have that amount of money in a restricted fund in order to cover that, and we do. And unrestricted, of course, is the remainder. One thing of importance here, you might recall from the last year or two, I've discussed with you that we have a bond. The bond covenants require a debt service coverage ratio. Essentially take the two outstanding obligations together and you go to the highest year of debt service, it's about 286,000, if I remember correctly. And you take that number times 120%, and we have to compare that to the net revenues available in water and sewer funds to cover that. So in 2017, I reported to you that we didn't quite cover that ratio, so we violated the bond covenant. The action that's required is that we adjust our revenue or our spending such that we come back into compliance. So in applying that same test for 2018, I was really pleased to be able to tell you we covered by a little tiny smidge, about $11,000. So it's not a lot of room, but we were short last year. I remember the figure was between 40 and 50,000. So we had enough improvement in increased revenue, expense management to be able to get that back into compliance. So that's a good thing. Page 18 is a summary of the revenues and expenditures. So water, sewer, and property management separately, but once again focusing on one at a time. The water fund, $986,694 in revenue, expenses of $1,153,000, operating loss of $167,000 before we have to subtract most notably interest expense. So when we get done with that, we have this loss of $248,892. Remember that includes an allowance for depreciation, which is significant here. And the water fund, $348,479. So an obvious first question would be, well, how can we have debt? How can we satisfy debt coverage ratios? How can we even sort of keep this whole if we have these losses? At least in the short term, the fact that we're not expending cash for depreciation helps. There's a different theoretical discussion about depreciation is an expense because we had to buy something at some point. So that cost has to be recovered eventually. But at least in the near term, we're able to keep it together. Similar result in the sewer fund, $651,402 in revenue. Expenses $742, a loss of $91 before the interest expense. So a loss of $135,219. So there's some good news there. The losses were of a lesser magnitude, and we're able to have enough improvement, as I mentioned a moment ago, to satisfy the debt coverage requirements. So it's really important when you're looking at the possibility of restructuring any of your bond debt, perhaps. So that was nice to get that done. The flip side, of course, is eventually we got to reduce these losses or we won't have resources enough to be able to maintain the system. Pretty simple. I don't think that's news. Page 19 is a required cash flow statement for proprietary funds, which is followed by the footnotes beginning on page 20, and those go on for a while. I think they don't conclude until page 32. I will tell you that there's lots of good information in there, but there isn't anything that's altogether different from last year in terms of having to adopt new accounting policies to comply with changing governmental accounting standards and that kind of thing. So at least the nature of the communication is the same, but we're updating the amounts, dates, and verbiage. Question?
I do have, but I was reminded I'm not supposed to ask questions, so keep going.
Okay, I got time. I got time.
Well, I do have a quick question then, real quick, on the depreciation, okay, that we were talking about. We're in the negative here because you're talking about the depreciation on our long-term assets, buildings, equipment, stuff like that.
Well, only as they relate to the water and sewer funds.
And the water and sewer fund,
Yes.
but yes, the
With respect
depreciation.
to those funds, yes.
And eventually with the anticipation that we have to replace that equipment, So we need to be putting the money back so we can replace that equipment. Is that where I'm basically reading here in the depreciation?
That's essentially it. Yeah, you make some effort to reduce the magnitude of the loss. So if we theoretically were exactly break even, zero, some people might say we funded that depreciation. In other words, we generated enough revenue to cover that annual cost.
So basically, we should be putting monies into an account to cover that depreciation every year so that we can replace the equipment.
It wouldn't necessarily have to be segregated, like in a separate account, but segregated or not, the concept is yes, to be able to increase the revenues, manage the expenses, but consider depreciation a real expense.
Yeah, it is.
So that we're beginning to generate some additional revenue that might help us either down the line to replace some parts of that system or equipment, or to repair it. As time goes along, it's likely that repairs will be costlier as the system gets older.
So because you're looking for a question.
Sorry.
So do special districts normally have a profit?
Okay, let's see. That's really not a hard question, but I want to be careful how I try to explain my viewpoint on that. We don't think of them as profit-making entities like a commercial enterprise. But I've been working with governments and non-profits for a long, long time. And I can tell you that if you don't have a profit, in other words, if you consume all your resources every year, year after year, eventually you will reach a position of financial stress that will be uncomfortable. So should they have a profit? My opinion is yes. However, we have these resources for the purpose of providing services, whatever our government is designed to do. And so it does become a bit of a balancing act to have enough profitability to maintain a sound financial position, but at the same time make a good utilization of your resources to serve the public. Does that make sense? Hopefully. That's at least how I feel about it. You can get many other opinions, I'm sure.
Basically, like your depreciation, if you're putting your depreciation away, you're making a profit, but actually you're looking at the investment and get average interest.
You're looking at being able to replace that equipment or whatever it is that's going to have to be replaced in the future. You're going to have money to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then it gives you some ability to either acquire that or to be in a better position to finance a portion of it. That's the case.
This number depreciation is, well, I thought kind of arbitrary, what I found with that. So is it adequate to actually cover the depreciation costs?
Well, I would say two things to that. First, it's not exactly arbitrary because it's computed based upon the cost of the assets that you've either acquired or constructed. So it's based on your actual costs. Now, where there could be a deficiency is when the time comes to replace those, it's very possible they could cost a lot more than they did the last time around. So if that's what you're driving at, certainly that's possible. I wouldn't call it arbitrary, but it is an estimate. And I'll tell you how we come up with it. There's guidelines by the Government Finance Accounting Officers Association. They've studied these things for decades. And they produce some guidelines for the useful lives that they recommend for certain types of assets. And for the most part, those are the guidelines that we follow.
You depreciate the assets according to their timeline.
Yes, sir. I mentioned the footnotes went on for a long way. They're followed by, on page 33, a required supplementary schedule. It's a budget and actual comparison for the general fund. you can see it actually came out fairly close to what we budgeted. But if you focus on that line that says total expenditures, you'll see we had budgeted expenditures of $1,042,400, and our actual turned out to be a tick above that at $1,054,146, which may technically be considered a violation of Colorado budget law. So that is disclosed in the footnotes. Same condition with water and sewer funds. So the remedy there is to kind of keep tabs on this, so as you approach the end of the year, you can consider a budget amendment if your revenue and spending patterns turn out to be different than what you anticipated when you adopt your original budget. Does that make sense to everyone, hopefully? Good. It is technically a compliance finding, so it's in the footnotes. My experience in the past is if there's any inquiry at all, it might be from the state auditor's office to simply remind you that you're not supposed to do that. They may ask you to explain it. In our case, we kind of knew we should have had a budget amendment, it just never took place for whatever reason. One of the tricks here, though, is when we enter into agreements or we finance the acquisition of equipment. It causes, in a year we place that agreement into place, and we enter into it, it causes a spike in our capital outlay spending. Here's the reason why. It's because that account captures not only the amount that you paid in that year, for example, the down payment or maybe the installment payments that you agreed to, but the whole equipment cost. And the offset is in a category that's not really a revenue, but it kind of has the same effect on the bottom line, and it's called other financing sources. So when you enter into those agreements, you have to think about whether or not you should have to supplement your budget to accommodate that higher level of capital outlay. That makes sense to everyone? And we had one this year. We talked about it already with Jim and Yvonne. So I think we're kind of all on the same page there. We just have to remember to accommodate that before the end of the year. We need to either supplement or amend those budgets. The budget and actual comparisons for water and sewer funds are not considered required supplementary information the way we think of it and refer to it in the opinion letters. But it is required to be displayed because we have to adopt a budget for each of our funds. So those follow on pages 35, 36, 37. And hopefully you have the last page that I do, which is 38. And that is a summary of the cash that we have available, the current year revenue, meaning 2018, and the corresponding expenditures for the Conservation Trust Fund. That's included so that the state auditor and other state readers will know that we have properly accounted for those CTF funds and that they match the internal report that we filed with the state. It's kind of a quick run through, and the only thing I think that I wanted to be sure to talk to you about that's not actually in the body of the financial statements is we kind of referred to at a time or two before that we were very close on the limitation for our table limitation for our revenues. We were really close 2 years ago, and we had a little bit more room in 17. But in the way that we calculated it in 18, we think you have a small excess revenue. Small meaning about $6,600. We kind of went over that with Jim, Yvonne, and kind of went through the figures, how we determine those amounts, and asked for them to kind of review it, make sure we didn't have questions along the way. But at this point, it looks like we have that a little excess. So it really technically is not a violation of the law unless you fail to respond to it. So our response when we have excess revenue is to choose amongst our couple of alternatives. One is we can have an election and ask the voters to approve allowing the district to keep and spend that money. Or alternatively, we can refund it. And the most common refund mechanism that I have seen, and there may be others that have been used out there, the most common one that I have seen when this happens is to do it in the form of a temporary reduction in mill levy, so a slight increase, or slight decrease in the property tax. And that would be for the ensuing year. So if you choose to do it that way, it would cause a slight decrease in our mill levy that you will need to certify by December 15th of this year. That will affect property tax collections next year.
So the reason for this, it could be from raising fees.
It's pretty much anything in the general fund that isn't exempt by definition in payment. So I mentioned a few of those. And the common ones, the ones we have here, actually, which are common to most governments. Sometimes insurance proceeds, so if we have damage claims for some reason, those insurance proceeds are exempt. Federal funds are exempt. Gifts or donations are exempt. Asset sales are exempt. And I think I mentioned this a moment ago, that lottery monies also are exempt. So unless it's in one of those defined exempt categories, the remainder is subject to this limitation. So that would include your property tax revenue, SO tax revenue, user fees.
What about excise tax?
Yes, a good question. Excise tax that we got for the first time in 2018 based on the excise tax on the marijuana is considered exempt because it was a voter approved change. So that is not the cause of this little excess revenue. Thank you for mentioning that.
Possibly though, since houses have been going up so much in value, and increasing property taxes, would that possibly be a cause of it too?
It could be. I mean, I didn't go back and analyze it because these revenues are sort of homogenous, and we look at the non-exempt revenue, some of them went up and some of them went down. But yeah, it certainly could.
But our rate increase in sewer and water, that's fees increase, that.
Well, those are enterprise activities, and so the revenue increases in those are not part of this equation. So you raise water and sewer rates, that money goes directly to those enterprise activities and does not enter into this calculation at all. So basically we're talking about general fund revenues.
Which, well, what you're looking at too is your Parks and Rec, anything that deals with it as a fee or a charge is going to go into that general fund.
Yeah, Parks and Rec did a lot better too.
Yep.
But it's strictly 2018, correct? What you're talking about. So those fee increases did go into effect in 2019.
Yeah, no, it's 2018's actual revenue that we're talking about here. So fee increases that aren't imposed until 19 or beyond are not part of this number.
Did we have a grant that kicked us over that? I vaguely remember we received a grant of.
We had some grant monies, that's true. Actually, we had less grant money this year than we did in 17. And if it's a federal grant, it's a federal source funds.
I don't think we
No, it was a
Those are excludable, but I don't recall that we got much or any of.
GoCo's Great Outdoors Colorado, so was it federal money?
Well, the GoCo's been excluded.
Has it?
Yeah, GoCo's part of the lottery, so if that passes through to the general fund, either money we get directly from the state, or in some cases, we might get lottery funds from other governments.
Where did the playground money come from?
GoCo.
GoCo.
Any of those GoFo funds were excluded from this calculation.
So, with that being said, on the Tabor aspect of it, with having to pay this back, to put it in an election and ask people to give it to you, it's gonna probably cost you $5,000. So,
It's gonna cost the same amount of money. just to-
yeah, so it's better to give it back, and actually your taxpayer's gonna get probably not even a quarter of a cent return on it.
Yeah.
They won't even see it within there.
And when you break it down that way, it won't be much per household, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
So like our parks and recs, I don't think the golf course did exceptionally well, but I do believe our park and rec did considerably better than it's done in the past.
For 2019, not
But is
2020.
that going to, because it's not an enterprise, that's going to come into effect next year and is going to bite us in the wazoo?
It's possible.
Potentially, if we didn't raise our revenues.
Yeah, depending on your other revenue and expense.
During the budget.
And you did have an increase too from fees, because you went from a campground that was closed normally in September or October, and you opened for an extra
Yeah.
3-4 months.
Yeah.
2018.
And this is just something I wanted to bounce off of you real quick, but if we were to put parks and recs into an enterprise, it would eliminate those problems, wouldn't it?
It has to satisfy a definition under the Tabor rules. Doesn't necessarily conform to what GAP requires. And so we can't just flunk any activity there. But, it could be possible to look at certain activities in an enterprise setting. And if they satisfy that Tabor definition, then they would be excluded from this calculation. And the same would be true, I can't remember when it was, it seems like it's been a couple of years that we had a debrucing, for lack of a better term, ballot question that failed, but I think it was a general debrucing. And so there are circumstances where governments have asked to debruce certain specific revenue streams. And if we were to do something like that with relationship to fees we charge for parks, rec, swimming, golf, and so on, then it could serve to debruce those things where you want to perhaps adjust the user fee from time to time to try to cover your costs.
I think we already passed a resolution to do that.
For grants.
I may be a little behind where you guys are in thinking there, but if you've already covered that, I wouldn't know.
If you were to take it to, in this specific question, Parks and Rec to a enterprise, am I wrong in the statement of that would affect the ability to get grants in the future, being in Parks and Rec? Your GoCo monies and stuff like that tend to favor the non-enterprise entities.
I'm not sure I can answer that question, honestly. As far as I'm aware, as long as the anticipated expenditures satisfy the GoCo's requirements, it would at least still be a candidate.
So, now are we gonna have to have a resolution for that, to pay back and lower on the mill levy then within the next month or 45 days?
No, that's a good question. There are two things. For purposes of completing this report, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to address that question right now. Because it's not included in here. It's not even in the footnote that says you have a compliance related finding. Because there's no compliance finding yet.
Budget's.
You just have a chance to react to that. And in our case, if the board's decision is to, because of the relatively small amount, you might find it easier to simply refund it in the form of that, property tax credit, if you will. All you have to do is simply, do that when you adopt your mill levy for next year. And that board resolution to adopt that mill levy with that temporary credit, there on the form there, when you get a chance to look at it, you'll see there's a special line for it that says temporary property tax credit. And the idea is it's for that 1 year alone. And then assuming we don't have, excess revenue problems in the succeeding years, the mill levy can revert back to its previous level without having to have a vote. So it's important to, fill out the lines correctly, but beyond that, you don't have to do anything today.
I just wanna make
or
sure-
in the next 45 days to address this.
I just wanna make sure that we're within the guidelines. It's like, even in the same sense of having the, budget to meet the compliance, we have to have a budget, I lost it. Amendment to get us back into compliance. Is that too late? I've talked to, our lawyer says that you can still do it now, but is it gonna do any good?
Yeah, the budget's sort of a little separate thing, separate issue, because on the property tax, we have to do it by December 15th.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to declare your intent anytime before then, whatever you might decide to do. The budget's a little different. If you look at the guidance in the financial management manual that's produced by State Auditor's Office and Commission of Local Governments, they'll tell you that they think budget amendments should take place within the year that they affect. There'll also be a paragraph in here, a page or two later, that says there's differing legal opinions on what you do to correct the budget after the year's over. So I have heard lawyers opine that year's over, go ahead and do it, doesn't matter. In my way of thinking, not that affects the legal determination in the slightest. In my way of thinking, the concept of a budget is to adopt it and appropriate the spending before you spend. But it seems sort of silly to me to amend 18's budget when 2/3 of the next year's over. Especially in the case, let's just talk about ours here, where the consequences are minimal. If there's an inquiry at all, I can tell you it will come from the state auditor's office, and they'll say, you shouldn't have overspent your budget according to CRS, whatever it is. And they might ask you to explain it. And we'd simply respond by what happened and what we've done to rectify it. That won't be any more serious than that in our case. If we were in a position where we had wildly overspent budgets and we were defaulting on our obligations, then the inquiry would be a bit more serious. We're not in that position. So I really think it's a better idea to try to anticipate those spending levels. You can amend that budget in one of two ways. One is just an amendment where you sort of rework any of the revenue and spending items that need to be. Or alternatively, sometimes you're over because you got something happen you didn't anticipate. So for example, we might have gotten a grant halfway through the year, and when we adopted our budget, we didn't know we were going to get it. Maybe you hadn't even applied for it. So we know that revenue stream and corresponding spending will cause us to exceed our previously appropriated levels. And you can do a supplemental budget dealing only with that one issue. And it's kind of, if you think of it like it's a tack on to your original budget, and that will serve the same purpose. Either of those amendments, either an overall amendment or a supplement, need to be ratified by our governing authority. Anything else for me?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time and attention as always.
Like I said, as you go through this over the next week or two, If you have any questions, email me, so that way I can forward them to Sam, or we can, make sure that we have the right answers, you know, or an answer for whatever you're looking for. That way it will be a quick process. As you review your audit. Okay, two, we kind of covered that. It was something that I put in there. Thank you, Sam. I put it in there because I knew it was going to be something that Sam was going to bring up within the audit as being how we're going to deal with it. We kind of discussed it as whether going to the board of people or whether it would be as a mill reduction. About $5,000.
About $5,000, so.
Yeah, yeah, so it's not feasible.
So it doesn't really cost you much to allow nobody.
How is it?
We just, it's basically the formula they send us as to, this is your mill levy, this is your tax revenue, whatever, and then there's a line that says what you're gonna get back.
Yeah,
We can lower it, but we can't raise it.
yeah.
And that's what happens with that ratcheting effect with Tabor.
I mean, cause basically we give the money back to the people of Colorado City so that they can spend it, or we give it to the county so that they can spend it.
Yeah.
I'd much rather give it to the people of Colorado City.
But as what I'm saying is, like he said, you know, this year, we're at 6,000, but now with those fees and stuff for
And that's what
this year,
yeah.
it could be 12,000. So it could give you that ratcheting effect as your mill levy is going to continue to be lowered. And
Well, we can do an amended budget in say December,
we can do it in
offset-
November. Yeah.
offset your fees.
Your revenue increase. So like when we did the budget, we projected what we felt conservatively would be our
But that's still
revenues for 2019.
That's still
based
that's
upon
what
the
our Tabor limits
Yeah.
are, isn't it?
Yes,
But it's,
it
those
will.
Tabor limits are based, you know, your budget.
From the year prior, right?
Right.
But it's also
Where,
what you're taking in from your taxpayers, and
That's
you're increasing your income by the fees and stuff, so the taxpayers are gonna take less.
so if we took part of Parks and Rec, let's take all of it, but take the part that's making money, okay, and put it into an enterprise fund. Now, that enterprise fund can take that excess money, it's Tabor exempt, and we can actually improve our parks with it. We can do all kinds of stuff with that money, and it not be tied to Tabor.
You said there were still requirements.
There is still requirements.
You can't just label it enterprise zone.
As long as you meet the requirements, yes.
Yeah, we need to look, I mean, I myself think that would be a great thing to look into.
As I read it, the Tabor, you cannot bypass Tabor by changing to an enterprise fund. So if you change to an enterprise fund, then that amount that you change to an enterprise fund reduces the amount that you can receive.
From the taxpayers.
From the tax, well,
So it's not,
actually,
it would be
can't
beneficial
bypass
for you
Tabor.
going into 2020, but in 2019, it's not, you're not changing.
2019, we're hosed.
Right, I think we
I
have.
mean,
we're
toast, sorry.
still-
Politically incorrect sometimes, I do apologize for that.
Okay. So with that, there's a few things that we need to look at, but most likely I think it's gonna be that we'll end up changing it on our taxpayer.
Temporarily.
Yeah. So the next, bank account signature, resolution 13, 2019, since Neil came on the board, we're taking Justin off, putting Neil on. So we'll have to send this down to the bank, and everybody will have to go back at the bank and sign a new card.
And Courtney
passes.
would love to see you sooner than later.
Tomorrow. But we have to have all of it first. Okay, next I have under your green section is I gave you some information. This is kind of speculations of talking to Deb from Outliers that we used for the grader. She's saying that, okay, this is looking like what the interest rate could be on a loan, or if we refinance the bonds and stuff. With our bonds right now, it's jumping to 3.5, am I right? About half. You're jumping to 3% after this year. After 2 years, it's gonna jump to 3.5, it goes to 4, then it goes to 4.5 for the last 6 years, or the last 4 years of our debt. I had her just kind of run up some figures as to what we're looking at, and she says the next step, it's like buying a car. You're gonna go look at the car, see what you want, what it's gonna cost, then you're gonna go to the bank and either shop banks or whatever to see what kind of best interest rate you can get or whatever. That's all I'm asking, is that can we send out some RFPs to banks to see what kind of interest rate we can get, and if we do ask for extra money to help build these plants. And that's one of the things that she wanted to put in it, is that, you know, we did increase our rates to get our debt ratio and stuff closer. And like Sam said, you know, we're there. We have a fine line of about $11,000, but also we need to put equity back into our plants, and how are we going to improve revenue to pay for this, which that's what she wanted. It's kind of a letter set up, which I broke it down into our meters, what it's going to cost to rehabilitate our plant as filters, setting up backup our automatic system to clean, backflush, and things like this. I gave you that kind of breakdown, which goes down to about 940,000. I think by doing 900, it would give us a good starting point as to what we need, where we're going with it. But like I said, right now, we're not even at any of that stage of voting as to where we can go. All I want is to be able to send it out to get interest rates and stuff from banks, and show them that this is what we're looking at if we borrow extra money, and that way I can get that debt ratio about exactly what you want as to how we can do this.
So preliminarily, you're speaking basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, these 3 items here are the items you're talking about. The 60,000 is for the filters?
No, if you look at the whole sheet, you're starting out with the 500. Let me pull it up. You're looking at the 635,000, 38,000 that we're looking at for meters. That's putting them in extra parts, labor, whatever. The 220, that's your filters for the plant, which they're 8 years old now, and they're used ones from another plant. You have upgrades to skids. What I'm talking about is, I don't think we've had anybody come in since it was built to come in and evaluate to see where major components might be either light or not. With that being said, we had a guy come in from Siemens when we had our Porky bus go down. Just for his one day here was $8,000 for him to get it up and running for us. And that was due to bad connection through wiring, which that's where we were looking at. The other 40,000 of it being setting it up with a Wi-Fi system, so that way we don't have the problem of this wire corroding due to the elements. You're in there with water, chemicals, everything, that it's starting to deteriorate. We have unions that the wire, they say they're water and chemical free, but it's still going to be in there after 10 minutes or whatever. So we had a bunch of that replaced. But still, we're looking at what is it going to be to upgrade it to a wireless system, so that way we don't have to worry about that in the future. The other thing that we did is looking at removing and disposal of the material down at the sewer plant. At first, we got a bid, I was wrong here, it wasn't 60, it was 120, because they were looking at 1,000 ton of material, and we were able to clean our lagoon, our holding pond, our overflow for about $8,000 instead of 120, but we still have to haul the material off. And I think we can do that in a realm of about 30,000, right, Donnie? Or what we
Yeah,
have
so the
there.
original bid from Barris was essentially dredge a lagoon, stockpile material, and then haul material to approved site, which is essentially landfill, through some testing. We were able to, they didn't really break it down very well, but I wanna say they were somewhere in the realm